Welcome to another edition of the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Brent Chittenden and Kevin Scharf of the True North Nerds podcast at the Barrie Public Library Comic-Con. The True North Nerds podcast is essentially nerds getting together to talk about everything nerdy, from comics and toys to TV, movies, amusement parks, and more. While at the Barrie Public Library Comic-Con, Brent, Kevin, and I chat about the origin of their podcast, their thoughts about Fan Expo, feedback about the Canadian comic book industry, with shout-out to Adam Gorin, Michael Walsh, Chapter House Comics, and Fred Kennedy, and the surprisingly vibrant library comic book convention scene. Before I go further, I encourage you to like this podcast on iTunes and definitely check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website. Like it on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram so you can discover a lot more information about Canadian comic book creators and supporters. And now, my chat with Brent and Kevin of the True North Nerds podcast.
My name's Brent. I am the co-host and producer of True North Nerds, a podcast based out of the north of Toronto for nerd stuff. And also one of my other co-hosts, Kevin, is here.
Hello, I'm Kevin. We started this podcast just before Christmas last year, and we just wanted to. We got together and chatted about nerd stuff all the time anyway, so we thought, why not record it and put out a podcast? Because these sort of conversational podcasts are the kinds of things I like to listen to anyway. And so far, it's been fun. So that's our main goal here.
Yeah, it's mutated since we started. When we started, it was originally we were going to be reviewing Star Trek Deep Space Nine because nobody else was doing that, and we were doing it every 2 episodes. And we realized how long it was going to take us. So we decided we're going to do reviews here and there, like full episode reviews of things. But the Star Trek part has been put on the back burner, as it were. But since then, we've added interview elements to ours, and pretty much gotten more comfortable with the format, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we sort of, while we still talk about general nerd stuff all the time too, we started to focus a lot on things that are happening locally. We can say it. We're based out of Barrie,
yeah.
And this summer we realized how much was going on in Central Ontario when it comes to fan events. There was an event in Elmvale this summer. There are gaming events every month. There's events like this, like we're out here at the Barrie Library Con. So while we love to talk about general stuff, I think it's cool that we can sort of focus a little bit too and talk about what's going on here.
That's cool. So the basic sort of nature of your podcast is to cover nerd type stuff.
Yeah.
Would you say, well, what sort of element or focus on comic books would you say is part of what you talk about?
Fairly big, because we're all comic book readers of different sorts. Ryan and I get books pretty much on a weekly basis. My wife gets a couple throughout the month, although her pull list is starting to get bigger than mine. And Kevin reads a fair amount through here and there and the library system and things like that. And you've switched to digital now with Hoopla, right?
Yeah, I just discovered the library app, Hoopla, and there are so many comics on there, and their interface is really great. We actually met at the local comic book store here in Barrie. That's how we started hanging out. It was back in about 2006, I guess.
Yeah, I was living at home at the time.
Yeah, so. And the local comic store here in Barrie, which is now called Big B, we would hang out there on Wednesdays on New Comic Book Day, and then we'd go out to a pub and chat about everything back then. And that's how our friendship began, and that's sort of what the genesis of the whole podcast was too.
That's cool. How about you talked about being recently at Fan Expo 2017 in Toronto. Was there anything unique that you want to relay about that? Anything that you thought was kind of interesting?
Well, you're going to get sort of 2 different perspectives. Fan Expo, I have a professional relationship with. I've been used as a moderator for a lot of their panel. Well, not a lot, like a couple panels per weekend. I'm going on 4 or 5 years now. And so my perspective is who I get kind of thing. And sometimes it's like I get these really awesome lineups of creators. I did a sketch duel on the Thursday. I hosted it, and I got Jay Fosgett, who is out of the Detroit area. He does a book called Bodie Troll, and he's done My Little Pony. He's working on a Marvel book right now. Great guy. He is a Canadian fanboy. I think if he could figure out a way to live here legally and like work here, he would probably move. I also have Ty Templeton, who is a local Toronto creator, who is not only is he one of the kind of more underrated comic creators out there, he is just hilarious. He's got so many stories all over the place. Him, Adam Gorham, who is out of, I think he's out of Oakville now. He's a local Ontario guy. He's doing, his main claim to fame right now is he's doing Rocket, the Rocket Raccoon book for Marvel. And Sarah Richards, who does, she does a lot of indie books. She's doing covers for My Little Pony here and there, but they're kind of like a painted look cover. She's a very unique artist. So it's getting those groups of people who are like, from all over the place and seeing what they do with crowd suggestions for their sketches. The Darkwing Duck one was fantastic because you get like Ty and Jay both do cartoony stuff. That's what they work in. So that they were closer to what the Disney Darkwing Duck looks like. Adam's style is very sort of stripped down superhero-y, I guess is a good way of saying it. So like his almost looked like the Shadow, and then Sarah couldn't figure out what to do, so she drew a realistic duck with a dark wing on it with an arrow pointing to it. So it's stuff like that I really like and really do. It's the convention itself. I'm trying to get back into like seeing it as not working it, but it's a little weird. Whereas Kevin was actually there to have fun.
Yeah, I just went as a fan. I just went for one day on Saturday, which is the biggest day of the convention, and I went to just a bunch of panels that I wanted to go to. I was super stoked to see the cast of Star Trek Discovery. The comic book voiceover panel was so much fun. I think a highlight for both of us was we got to see the premiere of Star Wars Rebels this year.
Yeah,
they did a sneak preview for us. What Brent didn't mention is we have a theme song for our show that we have licensed from Kirby Crackle, the band, and so the band was there, and Brent got to interview.
I did interviews while I was there too.
So that's pretty cool. It was I thought it was a great show this year. I had a great time, and I just went strictly as a fan. Like I said, our podcast, we're just sort of starting out, so maybe eventually we'll become media, but right now we're just having a good time.
Cool. Okay, well, maybe one last question,
sure.
Maybe a little bit hard-hitting, maybe, is your comment on the Canadian comic book scene based on from where you sit. If you have a sort of a little overview, what would you say about it?
Canadian comic book, it's in kind of an interesting spot right now. As Canadians on a whole, we tend not to brag about ourselves, but there is some really super good talent that is starting to infiltrate the major books right now, like the major comic companies. So right off the top of my head, Adam Gorham, who started off doing a small independent book called Teuton, with writer Fred Kennedy, who's a DJ at Edge 102. They started off that, and like as soon as I saw his stuff, I'm like, Adam is going to do something. I don't know what, but he's just got this thing about him. And within 5-6 years, he's now on Rocket Raccoon. They launched that book right around the time Guardians 2 came out. So there's him. There's Michael Walsh, who's doing all sorts of awesome stuff right now. He just did this week's Star Wars annual that came out from Marvel. He drew that. You have weirdly, we're starting to make our own heroes again. Because when I was a kid, there was Captain Canuck, and that was kind of it. And now Chapter House is really trying to push the Canadian agenda, I guess. But the cool thing I will give Chapter House is they have a lot of different books. You have Captain Canuck. You have 2 different versions of Captain Canuck. You have The Pitiful Human Lizard, which is a great, fun superhero book. And it's a book I wish I was writing. in a lot of ways. And you have Fred Kennedy's Fourth Planet is published out of Chapter House right now, and it's more of a sci-fi kind of thing. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on that way. Our convention scene has gotten really good in the last couple of years. There's Fan Expo, which is huge. It's depending on who you talk to, it is the third biggest convention in North America at the moment. Yeah, that's behind San Diego and New York. So I would be willing to say, from my experience, if it isn't third, if that's just their propaganda, it's a close fourth. Like, it's got to be up there. Like, because you always want to promote how big you are, but in their case, it's got to be pretty close. But there's so many other smaller creators that, like, just going through now is, you see a couple people that, like, if they stick with it, it's going to be pretty good. And now we have all these little conventions popping up, and there's a great library convention scene. Like, Oshawa is having one in 2 weeks that I've been invited to speak to at. Mississauga has a huge one happening. I can't remember if it happened or it's happening, because somebody I know is launching a book there. Because they've actually got their print copy, so they're going to be able to launch it. So I think it's quiet, but it's a better scene than it has been in years. If that answers your question.
Good stuff.
You have anything to add on that?
No, I don't.
Okay, cool.
Sorry about that.
No, that's good. Thanks. So maybe you can, where would people find out more about your podcast and maybe what you're doing next?
You can handle that.
I'll take that. We have a pretty good social media presence. True North Nerds page on Facebook. We also have a group that you can ask to join, but we're mostly promoting the fan page on Facebook. We're on Instagram at True North Nerds. We're on Twitter at True North Nerds. And you can email us at truenorthnerds@gmail.com.
Yep.
Our podcast is hosted on SoundCloud, so you can download it directly from there. We're also on iTunes. And if you do a Google search for us, I'm sure you'll find it.
Yeah, it comes up on now a bunch of different podcasting apps like Podbean and stuff like that. So it's pretty easy to find the show.
Cool. Good stuff. Well, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks to Brent and Kevin for taking time to chat with me. You can discover more about the True North Nerds podcast at twitter.com/True North Nerds. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to subscribe, like, and comment on the podcast. So please send your feedback to truenorthcountrycomics@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now.